Welcome into the latest episode of the Blitz Network Radio, everybody. Hope you're doing well on this fine October afternoon, morning, whatever you should happen to be listening to this podcast. With you, as always, your host and the editor-in-chief of the Blitz Network, Robert Zeglinski. And I'm pleasantly, not surprised, I'm pleasantly just joined by our lead analyst at TBN, Khari Thompson, tonight. Khari, how are you?
I'm doing great, and you know what? I appreciate your description of me as pleasant. I strive to be.
Don't let that get to your head, though. I don't send that many compliments out, Khari. Come on.
I'm grateful when I get them.
Yeah, exactly. Be grateful when you get them. On this episode of TBN Radio. So if you hadn't listened already to Adam Hess, our multimedia producer, and I already discussed the Bears' offense at the bye week. Get to that now, so you have a great idea, or get to that after you listen to this podcast. On this episode, we're going to discuss the Bears' defense and the state of their affairs at the break, and what is right now the NFL's best defense. We're going to talk about how we see things, what we learned, how we evaluate them. You know, whether Khalil Mack is the greatest thing since sliced bread, not to use an overused cliche. We're going to get into all that. And in case you haven't already, follow us on Twitter at the BlitzNet. We started that Twitter account on Monday. So we're going to be really using that to amplify a lot of our work and content for all you guys, loyal subscribers, who we very much appreciate. Follow Khari on Twitter at KD Thompson5. Follow me on Twitter at Robert Zeglinski. And without further ado, Khari, as I kind of led off with Adam, so I think obviously, you know, a quarterback throwing 5 touchdowns in one half and an offense scoring 5 touchdowns on 5 of their first 7 possessions is always going to be the story. Anytime, really, especially when in a league where offense has kind of taken center stage, that's what draws in casual fans. But I think it's lost in the shuffle how dominant the Bears defense was against previously one of the more surprising, high-scoring, high-octane offenses in football in Tampa Bay.
You know what I think, you know, particularly because of this quarterback and what he's been through the first 3 weeks. I mean, it was just, you know, all of us watching the game, whether it was, you know, on social media or, you know, just in our living rooms, you know, watching it all unfold, we were just like, so this is what a real NFL offense looks like when it's humming. Like, we haven't seen this kind of thing. At the same time, it's like people can, you know, maybe poke holes in, you know, if they choose to, in what the offense did, even though I think that there are some real things to you know, take out of that, and particularly the philosophy that they used. You know, they could say, "Oh, Tampa Bay's defense is terrible, their secondary is bad." I mean, those things are true, but as you alluded to, that offense came in one of the NFL's best, and the Bears defense just throttled them. I mean, that was it was amazing because, you know, yeah, in the beginning of the game, right? You know, they just kind of stomped out, you know, any drive that, you know, they had going on. But then as Tampa Bay started to you know, put drives together and started to you know, get into the red zone, or get towards the red zone, even just get on the Bears side of the field. And then when Jameis Winston had a little bit of momentum going, the Bears just shut it down on multiple occasions. And so that, to me, that's the indication that I think that people around the league are starting to take into account here. Like, this Bears thing, this might be for real. This defense is not like, I mean, there are going to be other tough opponents, you know, down the road, to be sure. But this was the first indication, maybe, to a lot of teams, like, okay, you know, they lost to the Packers, you know, they shut down the Cardinals and the Seahawks, but they're kind of like, right? But this was a really high octane offense with some serious weapons in the passing game, and the Bears just didn't let them do anything.
It's almost the contrast. It's like you can poke holes, kind of. I like you mentioning that. You can poke holes in what the Bears offense did. You know, oh, Tampa Bay is awful. You can't really do that to the Bears defense. And outside of one half against the Packers, I don't think you can really poke holes in any of the Bears' defensive performances through the first month of the season as they enter their bye week. I think generally, while they're not perfect, maybe at cornerback on the boundary, but that's a weakness that even the great defenses will have one spot you can attack. Their performances have generally been wire to wire perfect. I mean, they have 8 interceptions, like as perfect as they can get in football. I should preface that, as perfect as they can get in football. They have 8 interceptions in 4 games. They had 8 interceptions in 2015. They had 8 interceptions in 2016, and they had 8 interceptions in 2017. And now they have that many picks in 12 less games.
At first, I had to think about that. Like, is that number right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's like, yes, it is. I'm tallying it up in my head, and I'm over here thinking about, oh yeah, that's right. Danny Trevathan and like Aaron Lynch have picks.
When Aaron Lynch is getting picks, that tells you the state of this defense. When Aaron Lynch, noted coverage linebacker Aaron Lynch, who drops back.
I want to get into that a little bit later. The versatility that Vic Fangio is utilizing right now with some of these guys. We'll get to that later. But yeah, you're right. When Aaron Lynch is picking off passes, you're just like, okay, that's really how this Bears defense is going.
Everything is coming up Bears, essentially. And at this point, it's a overused like baseline foundation. That obviously they also lead the league in sacks and they lead the league in quarterback pressures, despite only blitzing at 10% of plays, by far the least of anyone else in football. So they can rush with 3 or 4 guys and still get after quarterbacks like no one else in the NFL. The number one hallmark of a contending defense, of a championship defense. So I guess what I'm trying to allude to, Khari, is what kind of what stuck out to you most about these kinds of numbers and how they've been able to just stack dominant defensive performances after dominant defensive performances, because it just feels like they're getting better every week.
Essentially, this defense, and yes, it's not perfect as you mentioned, right? But for one thing, this defense is deeper than imagined, and it's because of the emergence of guys like, and I've said this before, I did not expect anything out of Aaron Lynch coming into the season, given his injury status. The fact that he's playing as well as he is right now as a backup, coming in as an edge rusher, and even the things that you can do with having Khalil Mack in the game on the other side, or having Leonard Floyd, or maybe even some kind of mishmash of all 3 of them in the game at one time, if you really felt like it. It's been an incredible boost, because we came into this year thinking that outside linebacker was going to be a tremendous weakness. Obviously, adding Khalil Mack did a lot to dispel that notion. It became arguably, one of your strongest positions, if only because of his strength. But now you have Lynch playing like he hasn't played this well since he was a rookie. I mean, just straight up, and to have him be that guy that they wanted him to be, and honestly show us a couple of things like in coverage on that play that we hadn't seen, has been unbelievable. So their depth, particularly in the front 7, has been a very pleasant surprise, and really just the way that this defense is constructed and the way that they're doing things. The fact that they can generate pressure like this with just their front 4, that is essentially the dream defense that any coordinator could want to draw up. To be able to get pressure with 4 people consistently, not have to blitz and take chances. I mean, when you think of teams that, as you mentioned, contending teams, because I think back to the 2007 Super Bowl with the New York Giants, and that entire run, the fact that they beat the undefeated Patriots and really held them down, offensively. Why did they do that? Because they had an amazing front 4 that harassed one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time in the middle of an all-time great season. No one was getting in their way but that team, because you couldn't block them up front. That's the kind of thing. I'm not saying that they're at that level right now, but that's the kind of again, the dream defense that you want. And with that front, especially, there are so many combinations that are effective right now. Whether you have Eddie Goldman and Akeem Hicks, or you're subbing in, Roy Robertson Harris, to run with Hicks, Or you're throwing in now Bilal Nichols, who is looking like another 4th, 5th round steal by Ryan Pace. I think that we really need to start talking about his mid-round draft picks, because they're starting to really looking like they're showing up, roses right now. Maybe not all of them, but the ones that he's really hit on have been been amazing. Even when you think about a guy like Nichols, Eddie Jackson, something like that. And so the fact that they can do what they're doing up front is really the key to this whole thing. They make everybody else behind them better. I haven't seen a better example of how the dominance of a front four can change the outlook of a Chicago Bears team in a long time, more than 10 years.
I don't think that's an excellent final point. Like, I've watched / covered the Bears for 12 years now, and even those Super Bowl defense, the 2010 NFC Championship game appearance defense, that 2005 defense, those units didn't have that kind of a dominant pass rush. They didn't have
Khalil Mack.
They didn't have Khalil Mack.
In the end, that really is what it comes down to.
Exactly. They didn't have that kind of a dominant force, but they also didn't have the same amount of depth, Khari. I just don't think they had the same level of talent. The Bears haven't had this kind of a singular force with Mack, surrounded by fantastic supporting players up front to buoy their singular transcendent talent since really in the 80s. I mean, and Richard Dent was awesome, but he's no Khalil Mack. But, you had Richard Dent there. You had Dan Hampton there. You had Steve McMichael. You had a bunch of rabid guys just eager to get after the quarterback that was unmatched by anyone else in football. The Bears, this is honestly the best Bears pass rush the Bears have had in almost 3 decades.
I think that, as crazy as this sounds, right? You talk about, the Richard Dents and the Steve McMichaels and the great defensive players that you've had up front, and great Chicago Bears defensive players, period, that have come through this franchise. And I'm watching what Khalil Mack does on an everyday basis, and I'm just like, I mean, even if he only spent like 4 years here, are we going to end up being like, this guy was the most incredible defensive player we've ever seen? And immediately the thought is going to be, Dick Butkus was, clearly the most dominant player that I think that, this Bears franchise has had on the defensive end, just from, reputation and also just the general destruction of people. But I mean, Khalil Mack, I mean, at least for my lifetime, he's that guy. So it's really been amazing to watch. And seeing, and I'm sure you're going to ask me this later on, and I feel like you don't even really need to ask me the question, who is the MVP of this team?
Is it Adrian Amos? Is it Adrian Amos?
If you're talking about maybe the opposite of most valuable player, okay, I don't want to put it like that, because he's not like he's been bad or anything like that. But we can get into that later. But Khalil Mack, his talent level, what he has done through 4 games, I don't think I've seen a player just completely change the course of a franchise, at least the Chicago Bears franchise, that wasn't a quarterback the way that Khalil Mack is doing. It's really unbelievable. And I'm thinking of a play that I was watching in which Akeem Hicks sacked Ryan Fitzpatrick on Sunday. And it was the classic thing that we all talked about, right? We've seen how just the presence of Mack makes everybody more dangerous, whether he's drawing double teams or not. It just makes the defensive unit more fearsome. But there it was, that prime example. The Bucks threw a double team at Khalil Mack with a tight end and a tackle. Akeem Hicks went one-on-one with the right guard, and he destroyed him. And he sacked Fitzpatrick in like a second and a half. It's like that's what happens now. Like that's what other teams are dealing with. Okay, for one thing, you can't, as we talked about last week, you can't block Khalil Mack with 3 guys sometimes, and then you're going to go ahead and leave them one-on-one with an angry Akeem Hicks, who spent all of last season destroying any single blocking that people tried to throw at him, destroying double teams in his own right. And now you have Roy Robertson Harris, who seems to throw in at least one, splash play every game. I think that it's very clear to me, at least, that he has far outstripped Jonathan Bullard. I don't know that that's even something that we truly expected, because he's an undrafted guy changing positions, and we had high hopes for him. But Roy Robertson Harris is really that guy, rising up in the rotation to me. So in terms of depth and the way that they're playing off of each other, we haven't even talked that much about Eddie Goldman, and he's arguably the quiet linchpin, eating up double teams, destroying guys in double blocks, and getting tackles for losses. I mean, it's wow. I mean, everything that they're doing. People talk about defenses starting up front. There it is, guys. That's what you wanted. That's what you're getting, and this is the kind of Bears defense that you're going to get if they continue playing like this.
Khari, I think we're gonna need some water after this conversation of some kind. So some kind of thing to satiate us.
I mean, I got myself a little drink going on here. That might be part of why I'm getting a little amped up here.
A player you didn't even mention too, like that's going to benefit even more. That should probably be 100% after the bye week. There's also Leonard Floyd, who's going to have both of his hands, who's no longer going to be some kind of Frankenstein monster, or just be Deacon Jones. Slapping guys across the head with his club or in his brace. He's going to have full use of his hands. He's also been arguably their most versatile and their most capable defender. Aside from Golden, their best run defender for sure. That's another guy that benefits so much from Mack's presence, and I think that leads in well. He's probably not going to win MVP, and this spoils the later conversation that we'll have. But I almost think that if the NFL hadn't turned MVP into such an offensive award, into such a not even an offensive player award, it's essentially just best quarterback now, or best quarterback with best storyline now. That's what it is. It's not necessarily best player. It's not necessarily the most impactful player. It's best quarterback with best storyline on rising team now, MVP.
Yeah.
If it hadn't been changed into that, there's not really an argument you can make against Mack given his current pace. If he can maintain this, it's going to be awfully difficult to have a 20-sack season with 16 forced fumbles and get a strip sack in every single game the Bears play. I wouldn't doubt that. I wouldn't tell that to Mack's face to say he couldn't do it, but just the law of probability says he's probably not going to maintain that pace fully. But even so, he'll probably have 16, 17 sacks. He'll probably have something like 10 forced fumbles. He'll have the demonstrated effect on the rest of the Bears defense.
These numbers that you're throwing out, they seem absurd, and yet you think about that. No, the fact that he has 4 already, like 4 forced fumbles already. Who does that, right? And I mean, you're over here talking about 16, 17 sacks. I mean, for a Bears defender, that has not been anything close to reality that we have really discussed at all. I'm glad that you brought up Leonard Floyd, because I really watched for him. He's thrown in a couple of nice pass rush moves that haven't gotten noticed because someone else has kind of cleaned up the play. So it always looks like everybody's like, where's Leonard Floyd? He's really disappointing. He's not getting on the stat sheet. But I think that, bringing that up, he has improved so much as a run defender from where he started out. Coming in as a rookie, being too lanky, not physical enough. He didn't know how to leverage his length, but his length and athleticism show up all over the field. And definitely the play that impressed me most. And I think that, exactly, you have an idea where I might be going from this last Sunday, was the pass deflection he had, which was just an unbelievable display of athleticism. This is not like he's at the line of scrimmage where it's like a J.J. Watt kind of thing, where you're standing there, you're reading the quarterback's eyes, you kind of just throw your arms up or whatever, and you time it just right, and you bat it down right at the line of scrimmage. This is him down the field, not even fully turned towards the quarterback, sees the ball thrown, jumps up with his right hand and just kind of bats it. And the reaction time to be able to make that play, is, I mean, that was outstanding. And that's the kind of thing that again, you talked about, him being their most versatile defender. I feel like that's going to be the kind of thing, with his role. Like, we're not going to see him at this point get 15 sacks. I don't think that's really going to happen.
Hold on, before you finish, I'm disappointed you didn't compare him to Dikembe Mutombo. Like, that would have been the perfect. That would have been the perferct comparison.
He didn't do the finger wag, man.
But that's not his style. But, okay, but how he jumped up, like he did it in his head. He did it in his head. Come on. Anyway,
something like that. Either that, or he was doing a LeBron style chase down block or something. I don't know.
Right. Anyway, he's not going to get 15 sacks,
but he's going to be that. Again, a quietly, incredibly valuable player on this Bears defense because of the sheer number of things that he can do. And we've already seen this a little bit with, Aaron Lynch, the way that they're moving him around. I mean, Mack, basically, they're going to let Khalil Mack do what Khalil Mack does. Even the fact that they allow him to, if he wants to put his hand on the ground, they let him put his hand on the ground on pass rushing downs. They're just like, you know what, you do your thing, as long as you keep on, ripping the ball out of the quarterback's hands and swatting people as they're in their throwing motion and throwing them at the ground, whatever it happens to be. But these other guys, with Lynch and Floyd, they're moving inside, they're moving outside, they're stacking on top of people to create confusion among offensive linemen. They're stunting. They're moving all around, and then Floyd dropping into coverage, which again is one of those strengths that people wanted to utilize with him coming out of the draft. So Vic Fangio has so many toys to play with right now, especially up front. That again, you can tell that as Matt Nagy had a lot of fun calling that game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Vic Fangio's been having fun like that the entire season.
That's a perfect segue. I know it's very early, and this is a large risk of hyperbole. But is this defense that Fangio is coordinating right now? Is it as talented as the great units he had in San Francisco that he built much of his reputation on? Is it maybe more talented?
I think that they could be about equivalent, maybe if you add up the sum of the parts, because I think that there are certain areas in which those San Francisco defenses were, they were better and a little bit more physical, particularly in the secondary. I think that they had better. They had a better secondary. They had better corners, I think, and they had a better tandem of safeties. I think that Eddie Jackson, though, I'm really high on him right now, as a playmaker, and I think that he could really tip that scale. The linebackers, they had an advantage at inside linebacker. Patrick Willis, he was really good. Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman were one heck of a combo. At the same time, I think if you're talking about Khalil Mack, he skews so much of this because this is a Hall of Fame talent, the likes of which they just don't come around that often. So he elevates the entire, the entire outlook of the defense. And I think that when you throw in somebody like Akeem Hicks, I really like Justin Smith. I think he was a great player. I think that, Akeem Hicks and Justin Smith are probably about as good at analogs as you can find. And Khalil Mack is the one who really tips the scale because he is so amazing. Alden Smith, great player. When he was with San Francisco, also really liked, Ahmad Brooks. Yeah, Ahmad Brooks was their other outside linebacker that they had. Also really good. None of them were close to Khalil Mack. He's really the one that tips the scale. So I think that it's close. They might be more on an equivalent level by the time this year is up. I don't think they're that far away from one another. I think that it definitely has more potential than that group because so many of the players are young.
I think I'd agree with that assessment. You have to. The one mark that I think you could definitively give over those San Francisco units, It is Mack. It is Mack, like you kind of say, like where he's by far to me the best player and most impactful player. I mean, he's a more singularly dominant talent than Patrick Willis or Navarro Bowman ever were.
Yes.
He's better than Akeem Hicks is Justin Smith's equivalent, and you could make an argument that Akeem Hicks is as good as Justin Smith was.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing I think I would veer to a little bit, because I think that, you know, the totality of Justin Smith's career, you know, is he has more of a resume than Akeem Hicks does. But I think that Akeem Hicks with the Chicago Bears, this particular guy, he's really a great player here.
All in all, for me, as someone that has been one of the more vocal people that covers the Bears, that's said all along in the aftermath of the 2017 season, that said all along in the aftermath of the 2017 season where they weren't actually good. I don't think they were good, and I often hated how Twitter wanted to treat me as I was trying, like, I remember the backlash for saying that it was a hot take, for saying that the 2017 defense wasn't good, but they weren't. And how they were leaning on 42 sacks as this big mark that the pass rush was fine, and
they weren't elite. You know, they certainly weren't, and they were
an above average defense that couldn't oppose their will when it came to the good teams. They were an above average defense, and that's it. And for me, as a vocal critic, to finally, you know, I'm just basking in that. When you see me vocally praising them in podcast form, in writing, on social media, I'm just telling all of you guys listening to this, like, this is for real. Like, you shouldn't really have anything to worry about this defense. Like I don't see any issues. I don't see any glaring issues outside of, oh, hey, you know, when you play an elite team, elite teams are going to make plays. Like when you play the Rams, like Sean McVay is going to find a way to try to, you know, minimize Khalil Mack or something, or Bill Belichick. You know, he's a well-respected coach. He's going to try to find a way to minimize Mack as well, or, you know, find ways to succeed. That's the only way you're going to beat this unit. And if that's your biggest problem, like, oh, hey, you know, the other really big dogs in the NFL, they're the only ones that can beat us. Like that's a good problem to have. Like that's the problem that faces the Patriots, the Rams, the other contenders themselves. You know what I mean? That's what they have to contend with.
And you know, the interesting thing, you know, in talking about you know, the Bears defense versus other teams, I was thinking about this earlier. The secondary was, you know, a concern, obviously, especially from the cornerback position. But given the way that Bryce Callahan has been playing, I'm actually wondering to myself, you know, if their nickel defense isn't better even than their base defense is, because, you know, so most of the game on Sunday they were in nickel because you know, Tampa Bay wanted to spread you out. They wanted to go, you know, lots of 3 and 4 wide receiver sets because they're trying to create mismatches for, you know, Mike Evans and Deshaun Jackson and things like that, right? So Bryce Callahan was on the field a lot. The thing is, Bryce Callahan's been the team's best corner. So it's like when you put him on the field, it's not like the Bears are sacrificing anything. As a matter of fact, you could argue that they're better. So it's almost like, yes, please, lots of do more multi-receiver sets and keep this team on the field. And the other thing that I find, you know, so interesting about it is it allows the Bears to cycle through their defensive linemen in so many different ways and keep some of these guys fresh, right? Because, you know, you're getting to spell Eddie Goldman a little bit with you know, whether it's going to be, you know, Roy Robertson Harris or Bilal Nichols, who has been playing some of the nose as well as a little bit of that 3-4 defensive end. You can trust somebody like Nichols to go in with Roy Robertson Harris as long as you have, you know, Khalil Mack or like Aaron Lynch and, you know, Leonard Floyd on the field. And you can expect things to get done there. And then when you have your base defense and you get to throw 3 of those guys on the field, obviously that's really good. But I think that it was just so intriguing because, I feel like we were talking before the season, maybe not you and I, but a lot of other people I was talking about the Bears with were talking about trying to minimize, how many corners, if possible, we're going to be on the field, and like throw 3 linebacker sets out there, try to generate more pressure and like all this stuff. But the way Bryce Callahan has been playing right now, the Bears, to me, really don't have a glaring hole in terms of finding matchup issues by, again, trying to force, a lot of nickel mismatches, or whether, oh, well, now we're going to take Bryce Callahan out and we're going to have our base defense with 3 of our really good defensive linemen on the field. So offensive, coordinators on other teams and other coaches have to be looking at the Bears defense right now, like, where are we going to beat them at? Pretty much the only answer there is, to me anyway, is we have to attack their corners. But even, Kyle Fuller and Kevin Tolliver really held their own on Sunday against a couple of pretty good receivers.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're stepping up with this defense and raising their level of play, which, I think that the cornerback group on the whole wasn't that great, particularly in the first 2 games. If they're going to raise their level of play along with the rest of this defense, you got to be looking at this squad and being like, how do we beat this?
If I said Bryce Callahan was the 2nd most valuable player on the Bears defense, you would say?
I think that I would say, yeah, I could dig that. If or a third, maybe if you wanted to go
behind Eddie.
Yeah, maybe throwing Eddie Jackson in there. Though I think that I would say that I would give Bryce the edge over Eddie just because of the question marks surrounding that position. And the fact that he has been so good has, again, elevated a cornerback room that there were a lot of questions about. And the fact that for periods of time, he was also able to move outside so that they could get, Sherrick McManus on the field to, spell Prince Amukamara, and something like that. So his versatility and ability to cover anybody anywhere thus far this season has been an incredible boon. And then Eddie Jackson is, right alongside of that, obviously, because he is the guy on the back end cleaning up everybody's mistakes. And as I really would love to get into, he's creating some incredible play, opportunities for himself and for this defense.
This is the Blitz Network Radio, 3rd episode since our official launch of the podcast. The Editor-in-chief of TBN here, Robert Zeglinski, talking with our lead analyst, Khari Thompson, about the state of the Bears defense at the bye week. Follow us on Twitter at the BlitzNet, and follow Khari on Twitter at KDThompson5. Follow me on Twitter at Robert Zeglinski. Khari, we've talked a lot about what the defense did well and has done well, and the good players, and how much, it's been a lot of gushing. So with that in mind, I wanted to flip it around. What was maybe there had to have been something. What was maybe discouraging from this first month? What might concern you about this defense? A hole. What's a hole you could poke in it?
Well, I think that in the first couple of games, it manifested itself a little bit because I think that, Khalil Mack was not, 100%, in game condition, or not in his best, physical condition, even though he was dominant. So in those moments when Khalil Mack is not dominating and when he's not constantly putting pressure on the quarterback, we kind of go back a little bit to 2017 a bit. So then it's, well, who is generating the pressure, right? If Mac's not doing it, is it Akeem Hicks? Well, if Akeem Hicks has been, playing like, 40 snaps or something like that, in his own right, he's probably going to get tired. So are we going to have to rely on the likes of Roy Robertson Harris? Are we going to have to get, Jonathan Bullard to bowl all nickels in the game? Are Leonard Floyd and Aaron Lynch going to be generating pressure on the other end? So it's kind of like if Mac isn't completely on his game, or another team does have, um, a formula in a way of minimizing his impact, if not necessarily shutting him down, are we going to see, the other people along that front line step up? And I think that we got a little bit more, a little bit more of an answer to that in the last couple of games. Again, once people were getting into game shape a little bit more, but it's still something that I'm going to look at, because Mac is going to be the focus of every team. He's that guy that you circle. You need to know where he is at all times. You need to have a plan to block him at all times. As long as guys are taking advantage of that, that's great. But we've seen moments where the pass rush kind of faded out a little bit, and particularly in that first game, it burned the Bears because, and I mean, of course, you're looking at it like Aaron Rodgers is an all-time great quarterback. Sometimes they just make those plays, but that wasn't happening earlier in the game when they were getting to him, and the difference was noticeable. Um, and then the other thing, I guess, to make it quick, obviously, is the secondary. What happens if teams start trying to pick on Kyle Fuller and Prince Amukamara, or if Amukamara is not in the game, Kevin Tolliver on the outside? If they decide to be like, okay, Bryce Callahan's good, let's attack these other guys who aren't playing as well. What happens if teams start trying to isolate Adrian Amos because he doesn't have the same kind of playmaking that Eddie Jackson does? Right? So this is not a perfect unit. There are vulnerabilities that you can take advantage of. It's just a matter of, can they play collectively well enough as a unit, and can they continue generating the kind of pressure that they have been thus far, to help them cover up some of those weaknesses. I hope so, but we've seen a little bit of what it looks like when they don't do it.
All right, and I hope you understand the reference. Let's say you're the Russell Crowe in a beautiful mind of the NFL. So you're Sean McVay, and you remember every single play call you've ever had. You have your Rams offense mastered to a T, and you have it running like a finely tuned machine to where you're not really scared of what any defense can throw at you. Since you're TBN's lead film guy, lead analyst, Khari, if you're drumming up a game plan schematically, what are you to beat the Bears defense? What is it? What are your focal points?
I, particularly from a passing perspective, because I think that from a run defense perspective, if you're talking about the Rams, specifically, right, or other teams with solid running games,
I'm using McVay
yeah,
as like a play caller, as that's probably the standard right now more than anything.
Right, yeah, and I guess I'm just thinking of it, from a running perspective. The Bears are really hard to run on, just because of, they have so many good space heaters up front, and maybe a team like the Rams, or a team with a good rushing attack, right? They're going to establish the run, they're going to pound it no matter what, because that's just what they do. But I think that ultimately, I'm not concerned about that. What I am concerned about is, if you get man coverage against the Chicago Bears, I'm looking at whoever Kyle Fuller is across from, and I'm going to try to attack him, because I still don't think that Kyle Fuller has played. I don't think that he's played up to what he played last year, the level that he was at last year, for certain.
I think he's at the same level. I want before you continue. I honestly think he's at the same level, and that was also something that I've really gotten a lot of crap for. I think Fuller was good last year. I don't think he was particularly amazing or anything. I think he's generally at the same level, which they still couldn't lose him. Like, he's still a top 15 corner or whatever, but I don't think he was like an amazing superstar by any means in 2017. The way the conversation seemed to center around him. Anyway,
yeah, I think he was good last year. To me, right now, I think that he's been average this year.
You do think he's been worse? Okay.
I not necessarily like I think he's been atrocious, but I think that, again, in terms of Fuller, right, he's always been a good zone player to me. If you're playing him in cover 3 or cover 2 or something like that, you're putting him in his zone, and he sees a play in front of him. I feel like his reactions, the way that he flows to the ball are completely different than when he is playing man coverage. I mean, I saw it a little bit on Sunday. He got really close to making a couple of these plays on the ball because when he sees it in front of him, um, he's kind of like Adrian Amos in that way. When he sees the football in front of him, he comes downhill hard and makes a play. Whether he's sticking his arm in there or he's making a hit. And that's where he's always been most comfortable. But if we're talking about man coverage, he's never been a very sticky man coverage guy. His footwork and mechanics are always a little bit slow to me. He tries to be, physical. I think he's definitely got a little bit of that physical edge to him, but his footwork, for whatever reason, just always seems to lead to him slipping, or just like kind of not being balanced when somebody's running a route against him, and he's got to mirror them. So from that standpoint, I would look to attack him. And this is a play that, from the safety perspective, the play that happened where they dropped it in on the left sideline. I can't remember if it was Fitzpatrick or Winston. I think it was still Fitzpatrick at this point. Mm-hmm. But they dropped a fade route in on the left sideline to Adrian Amos's side when he was playing, a deep safety. I want to say I can't remember directly whether it was cover 2 or cover 3.
Was it a Deshaun Jackson completion?
It was Deshaun Jackson.
Okay, I think I know what you're talking about. I think they were. I remember looking at this yesterday in the All-22. I'm pretty sure they had 2 deep safeties, and it was definitely on Amos' side. And that was, you're talking about the play where Jackson got like another 20 or 30 yards after the catch, correct? Like it was a very early.
No, so actually, this one was.
Oh, it was a different play. Okay,
yeah. So it was a fate. Yeah, I know which play you're talking about when he got the big run after the catch, right? Because he got behind the linebackers and like they didn't react to it quickly enough. I think that was indeed to Amos' side as well. But the one I'm talking about was a throw down the left side. It was a fade route that was dropped perfectly in the basket, and he caught it, and Amos shoved him out of bounds, or whatever. But that kind of play, picking on Amos' inability or perhaps hesitation to instinctually play the football and get en route before the ball is thrown. Like those are the kinds of cover 2 beaters that people try to utilize against the Bears, back when they were playing, Lovie Smith's Tampa 2, that kind of thing. That is something that I would look at as well. Target Adrian Amos down the field toward the sideline, take advantage of the fact, like, people were doing, in 2016, the fact that his reactions to plays are far too slow. He will not, he has good range in terms of, the fact that he can run, right? That's not the issue. It's not that he's not a good enough athlete or that he doesn't have the skill. He just doesn't anticipate plays. So if I were them and you see the Bears in cover 2 or, any other thing where Adrian Amos is the deep safety in zone, I'm trying to attack down the field because in my mind, I'm thinking, try to make Adrian Amos get to that football and see if he can do it or not. Because I've seen too many examples of watching Adrian Amos, just show up a tad late to the football and think to myself, I think Eddie Jackson would have made that play. Mm-hmm. And so don't pick on Jackson because he's playing with great confidence right now. He's completely the opposite. If you're throwing near Eddie Jackson right now, you have a problem because he knows where you're going with the football. Adrian Amos has always been that kind of guy, like a Kyle Fuller, where he's waiting for you to decide where you're going to throw the football. He essentially waits until the football is in the air. Oh, now I'm going to go make this tackle, or I'm going to go try and break this pass up, and he never gets there. So that's what I'm looking to get at. I think that the linebackers are solid enough in coverage where I'm not looking at them as a weakness, but the corners and the safety position, maybe.
I'd agree with you on the linebackers, but I almost wonder, and while I love him and while I think he's going to be a great player, I almost wonder, how much an actual elite offense will look to attack Roquan Smith. And look to attack.
I think they will, yeah.
Because he's still so inexperienced, because he still hasn't seen enough looks, just like simple crossing routes and designed to get him out of position, pick routes and whatever and what have you, and other tremendously athletic tight ends. Like I mean, obviously the Bears dealt with OJ Howard this past Sunday, but they Tampa Bay couldn't get him the ball because just Fitzpatrick and Jameis Winston were under siege so much. That's not really going to happen against, say, the New England. That's not really going to happen against, Kansas City should the Bears play them in. Well, they could only play them in one avenue, but you get what you get what I'm getting. What I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Um,
And the Arizona Cardinals, particularly towards the end of the game, and obviously it's the Arizona Cardinals, but they were trying at times to take advantage of Smith with Larry Fitzgerald. And I think we can agree, even though Larry Fitzgerald is, advancing a little bit in age, I mean, that's still one of the best, most savvy receivers of all time, truthfully. And they certainly tried a couple of times to isolate Smith on Fitzgerald and take advantage of that a little bit, and with their tight ends. And I think that is something that teams are going to try to do to see what he's got, whether it's in man coverage or in zone. And there will probably be a time or two where I think that he makes a mistake because he's a rookie. One thing I will say thus far, though, is when I watch him on film in coverage, he looks incredibly disciplined.
mhm.
Like he knows where his landmarks are. He's he's perfectly comfortable to kind of wait there. He feels throwing lanes really well. So it's like if you slide your eyes in a certain direction, or he feels a receiver entering his zone, he always does a great job of kind of sliding in that direction to maybe close it down a little bit, but he never gets too far out of position. He always kind of stays balanced. He doesn't lunge. And then once the ball, once it gets in the air and he knows where it's going, then he attacks. So I think that, more often than not, I feel confident that hopefully he'll make the right plays, because I think that he is playing like a guy who's really prepared and he knows what he's doing out there on defense. That doesn't mean teams aren't going to try him, because they've already tried. And I think that, again, the defense being as good as it was against Arizona and against some of these other, against Seattle as well. Tampa Bay didn't really have as many opportunities to do that because they were just getting throttled the entire game. But, I think that teams are going to try to take slot guys and receiving tight ends and try to see what Roquan Smith has got, because he's a rookie. Why wouldn't you do it? I feel fairly confident right now that he won't make too many crucial mistakes. Maybe that's me being overly optimistic.
That's fine. We can drink Kool-Aid sometimes. That's fine. Um, w- I'm. I think I'm going to safely assume this, Kari, because from my perspective, I do think this defense can get even better, but I really and that they're going to get better. But it's really only going to happen based off of two things. So one is the obvious Leonard Floyd having both of his hands after the bye week, and then the other Khalil Mack being in tip-top football shape, being fully recovered from his um, the holdout of his training camp and such, and not participating in all the preseason. Otherwise, I think the ceiling is kind of limited, because they're already so good, and the others, like, I mean, their personnel is set, and it's more just getting the execution better. Where do you think they can still diversify, and do you agree with that kind of sentiment? Where else can this Bears defense improve?
I think that it's almost on a more individualized level, where
Mm-hmm.
now you're looking at certain players, like, hey, you have to step up your game a little bit, or you're looking at certain guys that are ascending now, like Eddie Jackson, who are starting to kind of exert their will a little bit on this defense and make plays, where if he continues to play the way that he is right now, and again, just kind of generating impact plays because instinctual nature, I think that perhaps they are really good right now, and they're playing very cohesively as a unit. But, if you start adding in some of these individual performances and people getting back to full health, there's still a little bit of room for growth here. And I think that some of it is just going to come with playing together a little bit more. And there's a possibility that as they do play a bit more and they continue to gel as a defense, and Vic Fangio kind of takes advantage a little bit of what he has, and calls the diverse coverages, like the one that stands out to me being obviously the one that Bryce Callahan got an interception on against the Cardinals. It was such a perfectly called like cover two man scheme where it kind of took away the deep shots that I think that Rosen wanted to get a chunk play, forced him to go after Callahan, who made a great play, and also the one that Prince Amukamara got the interception on, the pick six versus Seattle, where they had watched the film and they knew this formation was coming, and they called the perfect play for it. And you're at that point, you're just kind of giving guys opportunities to be like, hey, this is your chance, go make a play. And when you get guys that do consistently start to make some more, I think that was a big. I feel like that was a bit of a turning point for Prince, and it's unfortunate that he's kind of struggling with injury right now. But I think that could definitely be a bit of a turning point for him personally. And if he, plays a little bit more to the level that I think he was at last season, where I think that he was pretty solid, as opposed to what he was, kind of at the beginning of the year. I wasn't really that impressed with him from Green Bay and most of the Seattle game up until that point. Um, but yeah, once you start getting some of these individuals playing up to the level that they can play at, that's where the ceiling increase is going to come. I don't know that it's necessarily schematically or an overall talent level anymore. I think that there's a baseline now for success that they have, and now it's just everybody playing up to their potential.
Let's finish this off with a final, platform or set the table for what to expect after the bye week, Khari. For those listening again, this is the Blitz Network Radio. Robert Zeglinski here with our lead analyst, Khari Thompson. Follow us on Twitter at the Blitznet. What are you specifically watching for in the second half, in terms of matchups, in terms of where this defense goes? I think a lot of the focus on this team after they come back and play the Dolphins is going to be how this offense can maintain that 48-point thing. But this defense is obviously still this defense is going to be the best unit on the team, like this year for sure. Maybe the offense can match it next year, but this defense is the backbone of what the Bears are trying to accomplish. So what are you watching for?
Well, and I think I mentioned this in my State of the Bears, because this is just, it's natural to look ahead a little bit. I'm in Boston right now, so I'm definitely looking ahead to the New England Patriots game, because I mean, who isn't? I think that what is really going to intrigue me personally is how the Bears are going to respond against teams that have really good receiving tight end threats, really well established ones. Because I feel like they've avoided that so far, right? Because I mean, the Packers had Jimmy Graham, but Jimmy Graham is not quite who he was anymore. I think they did a fairly good job with him. Certainly wasn't anything Jimmy Graham did that beat them, in week one. And then, weeks 2, 3, and 4, they kind of missed out on very dynamic, well-established tight end receiving threats. I really like OJ Howard, but he's still kind of finding his way. When you get to somebody like a Rob Gronkowski, who is, the best tight end of the game, I want to see how they approach those kinds of matchups, right? And this is something that I looked up, that I was watching last year, when you had Adrian Amos kind of switching to more of that deep safety look, while Eddie Jackson took on the responsibility of covering the main receiving threat at tight end, because of Eddie Jackson's ability in coverage. He was a former cornerback, and you can kind of see the smoothness in coverage. Well, first of all, they don't really have anybody big enough to deal with Gronk, so that's a challenge of its own. But just generally, when you face guys like Rob Gronkowski, Kyle Rudolph, Evan Ingram, you're going to run into him later on when the Bears play the Giants. Who is going to take on those kinds of responsibilities against these hybrid receiving threats? And assuming that it is Eddie Jackson, I feel like it has to be, because Adrian Amos can't really, I wouldn't trust him to match up with those guys. Assuming that's the case, what does that do to your coverage scheme overall? Do you trust Adrian Amos to man the deep parts of the field? Or I personally am wondering about using that as a decoy and then taking shots, down the field to receivers that are testing, those sidelines, the deep middle, things like that. And then, of course, testing the cornerbacks in particular. And as you mentioned, I think that I'm interested to see how Roquan Smith responds, because, we haven't, aside from his first start, where I think he had a really solid first game. I feel like we haven't heard that much from him, which I don't think is a bad thing, because I think that it means that he's been playing solid football. And I feel like, I'm glad that we're not hearing anything negative, because I think that means he's settling right in. At the same time, I am anxious to see that he responds.
If he was if he was playing awfully, how dare he hold out? So I'm glad.
Yeah,
I'm glad.
So don't even get me started on that one. But then again, as we mentioned, who's going to pick up the slack when Khalil Mack gets tired or when he's not on the field?
Right.
Who is going to generate that pass rush? Because we can't have a situation where Khalil Mack absolutely cannot ever come off the field, and run him into the ground, before the season is over. Because, ultimately that, we've been preaching depth and talking about how this Bears team is, this Bears defense, especially the front seven, is very deep. I want to see that in action. I want to see Leonard Floyd, if he's not going to get, 10, 15 sacks, let's see him get 6, in addition to the types of things that he does from a coverage perspective and the athleticism that he brings, and just tracking plays down and being a problem with his length. I want to see Aaron Lynch being utilized the way that he is right now as a pass rushing threat, moving him around formations, generating opportunities for him. So again, it's going to be, I absolutely agree with you that the Bears defense is the best unit on the field. It's going to be the best unit for a while. It might even still be the best unit by the end of the season, because of the talent they have there. But, those little things where teams are going to start to try and pick at these little matchups, like trying to take advantage of Adrian Amos or Kyle Fuller or Roquan Smith, or, whatever defensive end or outside linebacker is not named Khalil Mack. I want to see how they respond to that, because ultimately that's going to tell me if this defense is a true championship defense.
I'll build off of that last point as our wrap up, and I set this up with Adam as well last night. Kind of, I'll take a more all-encompassing look. I want to see. So I talked about how the 2017 defense would wilt against good quarterbacks, good offenses, and while I give them credit for tearing apart the Buccaneers and what was a good offense, I think we would qualify the Buccaneers as more of a paper tiger, right? They're not more of a pretender, and I'd like to see the Bears do that to Tom Brady. I would like to see the Bears do that to Jared Goff. I would like to see the Bears do that to Aaron Rodgers when the Packers and Bears meet again in December. I want,
Yeah.
I think they'll be ready for the test. I think they know that they still have to take it to that next level. But, it's like you just said, we'll know how for real they are and whether they're a championship contender when they can take it to that big stage. Because, this is a win now team. This is a team that has a 3 to 4 year window given their salary cap constraints. And they have to show that soon. And they have to show that even if they're even capable of that. You're getting Tom Brady, you're getting Jared Goff, you're getting Sean McVay, you're getting Bill Belichick in your house at Soldier Field. Let's see how you unleash Khalil Mack. Let's see how you unleash Leonard Floyd. Let's see how Eddie Jackson does. Against teams that are going to know how to attack your weaknesses and who are going to know how to exploit you. And let's see how how the defense responds to that kind of atmosphere, where there's the weight of expectations, where it's very possible both those games. I mean, I wouldn't even say it's very possible. I said it's like it's going to be those two games are going to be two national games, health permitting. Those two games are going to have some pretty wide audiences. Whether it be the CBS or Fox games of the week or Sunday Night Football, whatever. A lot of people are going to be watching, and it's going to be a big stage for this defense to kind of have a little bit of a true coming out party. And I want to see how they respond. I want to see them, push through that and show what they're capable of. I think they'll respond well.
And we saw, that the glimpse of that right in week 1 when they came out and they dominated the Green Bay Packers. They dominated the Green Bay Packers offense when Aaron Rodgers was healthy, right? And then they ran out of gas as the game went on. And I do think that the weight of expectation was a little bit too much. And I think that perhaps it was more, on the offensive perspective, and then the defense kind of, wilted a little bit as the offense did because they were on the field too much, and Aaron Rodgers had just seen too much of them and he was, dissecting them, right? But I think that after that experience, I hope, right, that they have kind of learned from that, right? Everybody is getting a little bit more, into the feel of the game. They've felt what that pressure is like, and especially with some of those games being at home, right? And you'll have the crowd on your side. They'll have the energy on their side. I would hope that they will learn from that and use that week 1 loss as fuel to dominate this next time.
This has been the state of the Bears defense, Khari. As always, my friend, a pleasure. As always, a good deal to touch base with you and for us to spread our wings out for our loyal subscribers and supporters, who we very much appreciate. Not just blowing smoke up for you guys. Like, we really appreciate your patronage and supporting our work and listening to us and reading us.
I mean, can't appreciate you guys enough. I mean, I think that, again, it's been just as fun writing for y'all and doing these kinds of things for you guys. Just instead of just kind of doing it on our own. It's been a great challenge. It's been a lot of great fun. Kind of exerting ourselves in this new way. So I hope that you guys continue to subscribe. I hope you have suggestions for us and continue to interact with us on social media. Give us your tips. Don't hate us too much.
Don't hate us too much. We don't hate you. Don't hate us too much. We are always open to those suggestions, concerns, questions. We are. I think that's something we pride ourselves on. For Khari, you can follow him on Twitter at KD Thompson 5. You can follow me on Twitter at Robert Zeglinski. And guys, we just started this, so follow us also on Twitter at the Blitz Network. This has been we're trying to get you through this bye week. We're trying to get you to caught up to speed on what to expect for these Bears. So now you kind of have both sides of the ball. Soon enough, football will be back, and we'll have plenty more for you through the rest of the week. Until then, stay classy, everybody.
Sayonara.